The first snow of the season came quiet, the way old Henry liked it. No wind, no warning, just a white lid laid across the east pasture while the sky turned the color of skimmed milk. He stood at the kitchen window a long time before he went out, watching it settle in that slow, patient way that makes a man feel the whole world is holding its breath on his behalf. It had been a dry year, then a long, hard autumn, and now this, a proper snow at last, the kind he had grown up inside of, the kind that meant the seasons were still keeping their old quarrel. Henry Prine was 73 years old that morning. His wife Caroline had been dead 4 winters. The farm she had kept him honest on, 50 acres of grazed land, a sagging barn they had roofed together the summer their daughter was born, 3 good milking cows and 24 head of beef, ran now on the patient labor of habit alone. He worked it the way men work farms at his age, which is to say, a little slower each year, and with fewer illusions, and with a certain reverent tenderness a younger man can't yet afford to show. He laced his boots at the bench by the door. He pulled on the heavy flannel coat Caroline had bought him the Christmas before she got sick. He took down the shepherd's staff that his father had carried before him. He stepped out into the snow. The cold came up from the ground through the soles of his boots and found the old fracture in his left foot and set to aching the way it did each year now. He walked the fence line slow, the way a man walks when his knees know his age better than he does. His breath came out in long, pale ropes. The pasture was a single page, unwritten, the line of his boot prints behind him, a sentence he made only to leave. Above, a red-tailed hawk sat in the top of the black walnut and did not move. The farm had its silences in winter, and Henry had learned to hear inside them, the way a diver hears his own blood in his ears at depth. He came over the rise where the creek bent around the hazel brush, and the herd was huddled below him, along the lee side of the hay ring, dark shapes against the white. He counted them out of old habit, 24, and then he counted them again. There should have been 25. He ran the number a third time. One was missing. He almost missed her. A small, dark shape half buried in the hollow of a drift not 20 yards off the ring where the cows had trampled the snow to slush. She was not an hour old, wet hide still steaming in the cold. Her umbilical cord was frozen to the ground where it had not yet dried. One eye was open, the other was shut against the snow. She was twitching, though he could not tell at first if it was life or just the body doing what bodies do in the last minutes before they stop. He turned, slow, and looked behind him. 20 yards further up the slope, in the gray flat light, her mother stood. A red heifer, number 6 on his tag book, one he had bought 3 Octobers ago at the Perkins sale. She was watching the calf, or not watching, facing her anyway. And when Henry took a step toward her, she did not come down. She walked instead a few deliberate paces up the hill, and stood again, and turned her head away. "Well," Henry said. He said it to nothing and no one. He had spent his whole life learning how to talk to animals when no one else was listening. Well, then. So that's how it is. He knelt. He felt the old knee pop. He pulled off his coat and laid it across the calf and lifted her up into his arms. And when he stood, he felt the full length of his age travel up through his spine and settle behind his eyes. She weighed nothing and she weighed everything. He had carried his daughter once this way, across a frozen field in March, a lifetime ago, longer. "Come on, little Button," he said. The word came out before he had thought it. Button. Because of the eye that was open and looking at nothing, the way a child's button eye looks at nothing. And because she was such a small thing, you could hardly tell where the wool of his coat ended and the calf began. "Come on, now." He carried her home across the field. The scarecrow watched from the barn corner with its one good button eye. Caroline had sewn that scarecrow the fall she was pregnant with their daughter. It had outlived her. It had outlived a lot of things. He passed it without looking at it and went on up to the house. By evening, the kitchen smelled of warm milk and wood smoke. He had made a nest for her beside the stove out of the old flour sack towels Caroline had kept in the bottom drawer of the pantry, the ones she had never thrown out because they were useful, the ones Henry had never thrown out because they were hers. He laid Button down into the nest. He mixed colostrum replacer from the cupboard with warm water the way you're supposed to, careful of the temperature, and drew it up into the bottle and sat down on the floor beside her. She did not want a drink. He had expected that. He put the nipple to her mouth and she turned her head away and closed the open eye. He waited. He said her name a few times, soft. He tried again. The second time she took the nipple and sucked 2 weak little pulls and stopped. He waited again. The third time she took it and drank maybe half an ounce. It was enough for now. It was a start. He sat with her a long time. The stove ticked. The window pane collected the snow in small patient drifts across its outer face. On the counter, his phone lay face up, and while he sat watching the calf breathe, the phone face lit up once, twice, 3 times. His daughter's name, Elena. He did not pick it up. He had not picked it up in 11 months. The first time she called after the long silence, he had been out in the back 40 with a lamb that had gone breech, and by the time he came in, her message was already on the machine. And he had listened to it once standing there in the mud room with his wet boots on, and then he had played it again. And then he had gone upstairs and lain down on the bed he had shared with Caroline for 41 years, and he had stared at the ceiling and he had not picked up the phone. She had called again 2 weeks later, and again 2 weeks after that, and then, for a while, not at all. And then, around the anniversary of her mother's passing, twice in 1 week, and then silence again, and then a text, "Please, Dad," and then silence again, and now this. Whatever this was, he did not know. He did not want to know. He did not pick up. Button made a small sound in her sleep. Henry reached out and laid his hand on her side and felt her breathing. "Not yet," he said. "Not tonight." It is a strange and particular kind of night, the one you spend keeping watch over something small that might die. Time comes apart into its ribs. You count them. You lose count. You start again. The phone rang twice more between 11 and 1. He turned it face down on the counter the second time. In the half-dark between the stove's firelight and the kitchen lamp, Button's breathing was the only weather in the room, and he found himself matching her. In, out, the way a long married man matches the breathing of his wife in her sleep without thinking about it. His hands lay folded in his lap. They were old hands now, knuckles thick as walnuts, skin the color of tobacco leaf, nails bitten short from a habit he had carried since the war. Caroline used to take them in hers and turn them over, palms up, and run her thumb along the deep line below the thumb and say, "These are honest hands, Henry Prine." She had said it the day they were married. She had said it the night their daughter was born. She had said it the last time he held her hand before the morphine took her under for good. He looked up at the refrigerator, held up there by a magnet shaped like a tomato, a photograph older than the phone on the counter. His daughter Elena at 16, leaning against the old green hay wagon with a piece of straw between her teeth, squinting into a summer Henry could no longer quite remember. She had her mother's mouth in that photograph. She had always had her mother's mouth. What she had got from him was the jaw, and the way the eyes went narrow when she was thinking something hard and wasn't ready to say it. He did not remember any more exactly what they had fought about. That is one of the terrible tricks age plays on a man. It takes from him the sharp edge of the thing and leaves him only the wound. He remembered the porch. He remembered her voice going tight the way Caroline's used to. He remembered saying some fool thing about her husband he should not have said, some small and stupid thing. And he remembered her car going down the drive, and he remembered the dust of it hanging in the late summer air for what felt like a long time after she was gone. Caroline had said, that night, "You'll regret it, Henry." She had said it kindly. She had said it the way she always said the hard things, in a voice soft enough that you had to lean in a little to hear it. He knew. He had known then. He knew now. He set the phone face down on the counter, and he stoked the fire. The storm came in the second night. It came the way storms come in this country, not gradually, but all at once, like a hand closing on a candle. One minute he was at the window watching the late blue light go blue-gray, and the next the wind had come up out of the northwest, and the snow had turned sideways, and the world outside the glass was gone. The wind took the tin sheet loose at the top of the barn eave and beat it against the boards. The power flickered twice. The third time, it did not come back. He stood still in the dark kitchen for a long moment, letting his eyes adjust. Then he went to the hall closet and got down the 2 kerosene lamps his father had brought in from the old house and the box of matches from the drawer, and he lit them with hands that shook a little, though not from cold. He brought the lamps to the kitchen one at a time and set them where their light could reach the stove corner. Button lay where he had left her, wrapped in the towels. In the pool of heat the stove was still putting out, though the fire inside it had run low. He knelt down beside her, and he set his hand on her side. She was not breathing. He had known men in the war who said they had gone deaf in the minute before a shell hit, that the whole world had emptied of sound, and that what came in its place was a kind of pure, round, terrible silence. He had not understood them then. He understood them now. The kitchen, the wind, the storm at the window, the ticking stove, all of it went away, and what remained was the small flank of a calf under his hand, and the absolute nothing happening inside her. He pressed his ear against her ribs. For a long and terrible second he heard nothing, and then the faintest knock, a flutter, the smallest possible sound a heart can make and still be a heart, losing its way, asking somebody to please come find it. "No," he said. "No, no, not you. Not you tonight, little button. Not tonight." He stood up. He stood up too fast, and the room tilted, and he put his hand against the counter to steady it. He crossed to the pantry, and from the top shelf he took down the old patchwork quilt. The one Caroline had made the winter she was pregnant, the one he had not touched in 4 years, the one he had put up there because he could not bear to look at it and could not bear to throw it out. He carried it back to the stove. He laid the quilt over Button and tucked it up around her shoulders the way a mother tucks up a sleeping child, and then he sat down on the kitchen floor beside her, with his back against the warm iron belly of the stove, and he gathered her up into his arms, quilt and all, and he did not let go. He did not know how long he sat there. The lamplight drew its small yellow circle on the ceiling and did not move. The storm went on and on outside the window, its voice changing the way storms do. First a howling, then a lower singing, then a long, sustained roar that sounded like the world was being unmade and put back together wrong. He did not sleep. He did not try. He felt the calf's heart against his chest, and he willed it to keep beating. He willed it the way you will a thing you have no right to will any more, because you have spent your willing already on other things, on a wife who went anyway, on a daughter who you let drive away. The quilt smelled of cedar and of the closet it had lived in, and underneath those, very faint, very far, of Caroline. Some small residue of her, some trace of the soap she had used, persisting in the cotton past any reasonable length of time. He bent his head down until his forehead was against the calf's wet forehead. He could feel her heart now, steady and small, not strong, but there. "You listen to me," he said. He was crying a little, and he did not care, and he did not stop. "You listen to me, Button. I've buried enough. You hear me? I'm done burying. You stay here with me tonight. You stay in this kitchen with me tonight, and we'll see the morning together, you and me. And then you can grow up into one of those big, mean heifers your mother was. You can kick me in the shins all summer long. I will not say a word, but you stay." The stove ticked. The wind tore at a loose board somewhere on the south side of the house. He sat with her. He held her. Sometime after what he guessed was midnight, he felt her stir. A small shift of weight against his chest, a single slow blink against his shirt, and he let out a breath he had not known he was holding. And he did not move, because he did not want to break whatever thread was holding her to the world. He sat. He held her. The night went on. He spoke to her sometimes in a low voice about nothing, about the farm, about the fields, about a summer a long time ago when his daughter had been small and had named every cow in the pasture after a president. She had been 6. It had been the year before Caroline got sick. Dawn came the way dawn comes after a storm, the light thin and blue, the world made new and indifferent. The wind had fallen sometime in the small hours. The kitchen was cold, the stove burned down to its embers, and Henry, when he tried to shift his weight, found that his whole body had set in place the way old hinges set in frost. His left leg was asleep from the hip down. His right shoulder ached like a bad tooth. His arms still held the calf against his chest. He had not let go. He felt her stir. He did not move. He did not breathe. He listened. A small breath, warm, against the open collar of his shirt. A second breath. A third. She blinked up at him. The eye that had been shut against the snow the day before was open now, brown and liquid, and it found his face, and it held there with a steadiness that he had not seen in her before. She looked at him the way newborn things sometimes look, as though she had just decided in that very moment who he was. And then, deliberately, with the small patience of a thing that has decided to live, she pushed her wet nose into the open palm of his hand. Henry Prine sat very still. He did not trust himself to move. There was something loose behind his eyes that he could not afford to let go of yet, not here, not in front of her. He held his palm under her nose. He felt her warm breath on it. He felt the small muscles of her jaw working. After a long moment he lifted his free hand and laid it very gently against the side of her head, and he closed his eyes. The first light of the day came in through the frost on the kitchen window and made a long, soft diamond on the floorboards. Somewhere out in the barn, a rooster. His father had kept roosters. He had kept them too. It was the kind of thing you did not change. Began its slow morning announcement. Then a second bird. Then the herd, somewhere beyond the frozen field, a single low call of a cow finding her footing in the snow. Henry laughed. He had not expected to. It came up out of him short and startled, like a thing he had been holding down for a long time had slipped its latch. He laughed, and the calf blinked at him once, and he laughed again, softer. And he bent his head and kissed her on the forehead, the way a man kisses a thing he has almost lost and did not. He sat like that, with the dawn coming up around them, and he rocked her once, gently, and he thought, well, so here we are then. So we made it. Spring found the pasture green as a new thing. It came slow, the way spring comes in this country. First the snow pulling back from the south sides of the building, then the creek coming unlocked one soft afternoon in March, then the wild grass beginning its slow return, tentative at first, then all at once, so that one morning in April Henry walked out to the barn and the whole east pasture was awake, a green field under a pale high sky, and the herd was out in it, grazing, and Button was the first one through the gate. She was not a little thing any more. She had put on weight through March the way healthy calves do. She had her mother's red coat and her grandmother's white blaze, and she had a certain serious bearing to her. a kind of considered gravity, as though she understood, in whatever way cows understand anything, that she had nearly not been. She led the herd. She did not push, and she did not hurry. She led, and the others followed, because the others had decided, in the way herds decide these things, that she was to be followed. Henry had watched it happen over the weeks with a quiet satisfaction he could not have explained to anybody. He stood on the porch with his coffee. The air was warm enough, finally, that he did not need a coat. The cup was the blue one with the chip on the rim, the one Caroline had brought home from the county fair the year they had met, the one he had used every morning for 46 years. He held it in both hands. He watched Button lead the herd out through the open gate and across the field to the far trough. He watched her drink. He watched her lift her head and look back toward the porch. It may have been his imagination. He did not think it was. He set the coffee cup down on the porch railing. He took the phone from his shirt pocket. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he opened the contacts and he scrolled. His hand was steadier than he had expected, and he found her name, Elena. He looked at it. He looked out past the porch railing at the field, at the calf, at the spring. He pressed the green circle. The phone rang once. It rang twice. It rang a third time. And for a terrible bright second he thought it was going to go to voicemail. And then there was a small click of it being picked up, and a pause. And then his daughter's voice, cautious, on the other end. "Dad?" Henry Prine, 73 years old, a widower, a farmer, a man who had buried a wife and raised a daughter and lost her, and stood in a snowstorm, through one night of his life holding a calf against his chest until the dawn, closed his eyes. He opened his mouth. "Hello, sweetheart," he said very quietly. "It's your father." And on the other end of the line, after a very long moment, he heard his daughter begin to cry.